Thanks very much, John, and hello everybody. I found the sound testing session as much fun as I did. Okay, all right, let's make a start. We're here this afternoon in our various places, joined together virtually, to look at the relationship between the current international GCSE for history and the new one to be examined in 2014 for the first time, and its sister, the Edexcel Certificate in History. So, what we're going to do then is, first of all, look at the qualification in overview, and then explore the paper 1, and then move on after a little break for ourselves to look at paper 2 requirements. Okay, can I first of all then find out something about you? So if I bring a poll over, tell me something, much as you can in this little poll, about your experience of international GCSE history, please. Thanks very much. I think we can see that we have a complete mixture. What I'm going to do is to use, wherever possible, the experience of the current international GCSE to inform our exemplification of what's required for the new international GCSE, and also just to form a basis for looking at what's different for those of you who are teaching the current specification. I should have introduced myself really, shouldn't I? Look, it says there, I'm Angela Leonard and I'm Chair of Examiners for History. Okay, now after we finish today's session, just a reminder of just what support there is for you, in addition to being able to come back and listen to this session again if you choose. You can see that from the Edexcel website you can get electronic copies of the materials that you need, and also you have the opportunity via email to pose questions to Ask the Expert. If you pose them, they'll come through to me or to the Principal Examiner for International GCSE History. And also our Subject Advisor, Mark Batty, to whom you can pose email questions and also contact him directly. Okay, so 2 qualifications. Their content is identical. Their assessment is identical. Which one your students take then depends on what you perceive as most beneficial or more beneficial for them. If you're planning this in a UK state school, it makes sense, does it not, for you to enter students for the Edexcel Certificate. And that's the way you qualify for funding, and that's the way that student scores count towards the EBAC measures. If you're an international centre, then let's do the international GCSE. And if you're an independent school, if you're teaching in an independent school, well then the choice is yours. All right. So for those of you who are teaching the current specification, the key changes. The biggest change is that there will now be, in summer 2014, there will be 2 papers, each 90 minutes rather than the current paper, where students do 3 sections all in one session. There are also prohibited combinations. So it's possible that the content you currently teach won't be available to you, or won't be permitted for you to teach for 2014. there's a mapping document on the website that summarises that for those of you who haven't had a chance yet to look in detail at the specification. But essentially, in the current spec, it's A7, a divided union recovery in the USA, that's been removed in section A, and in section C, it's the revolution and change in Europe, 1789 to 1848. So those two won't be available. And then there are prohibited combinations. In the new specification, the content that you currently teach in section A, and that will become paper 1, the content you currently teach has been grouped, and students may answer questions in one group, the early period up to 1914, or the interwar period. Sorry, let me do that again. Students may only answer one topic from a group. There are 3 groups, and they have to answer topics from 2 of those 3. And the 3 groups are the early period, the interwar period, and then the topics that go on after the war: Russia, dictatorship and conflict, 24 to 53, a world divided, superpower relations, 45 to 62, and a divided union, rights in the USA. Okay, so there are prohibited combinations, and the curriculum will need checking for that. Apart from that, the changes to assessment are really relatively minor. The wording changes improve the clarity of the questions and to improve the clarity of the mark schemes, rather than any huge change to the questions themselves. So, just to reinforce that point, if we look at the examinations compared there, you can see how similar the examinations are, with the exception, of course, that this is 2 papers, not 1, and students have more time to answer the questions that they currently do in section A. The exam question, I think, makes it even clearer how similar the topics, approaches to examination are. Our experience of the first year through was to note how impressive many of the responses were, but to note that there were time management problems, and hopefully they will be fewer when it splits into 2014. But some of those time management problems were actually because students weren't eking their time out properly. There were many very lengthy answers to questions that didn't merit an extended response, and we'll look at that as we go through today. Okay, so let's have a look first of all then at paper 1 and its assessment, and then we'll have a little break halfway through this session and we'll look at paper 2. Paper 1 then, 4 questions, and you can see that the suggested timing here is related closely to the amount of marks available to students. They write their answers in an answer booklet that's simply there to provide them with paper, so that they honestly should not assume that they need to fill up pages before they move on to the next question. And that's an importance to give them, I would think. Okay folks, sorry about that. Let's move back then. It's given you a chance to look at in a bit more detail at the paper 1 assessment if you're not familiar with it, and to see that there are relatively few differences from the current spec if you are familiar with it. Just a reminder for those of you familiar with this, and information for those of you who are not, that The new paper 1, that is the current section A of the current spec, the new paper 1 assesses essentially students' ability to know their stuff and make use of it. There are some marks available for AO3 for their ability to use source material, but in this paper, use, as you can see from that last question that you were looking at, in this paper, use of it is limited really to some comprehension of the provided source material there. Our experience in 2011 suggested that sequencing for students is a bit of a problem. So we'll have a look at together at some strategies to help them get better at that. The B question, the statement of effect, tended to be pretty well answered, and we've already seen that there's just a minor wording change, so that they're going to be asked to explain an effect rather than describe in the new paper. Okay, sample question A then, as you've already seen, requires students to sequence key events. And the key to marking it is that students should have events together, consecutively in sequence. So you can see the mark scheme there. If at least 4 of the 5 events are in the right order, students will get 3 marks. But you can see if they plop one in the middle in the wrong place, then it does severely affect the marks they can get there. Okay. Let's have a look at the B question then. For question B, that students have to explain effect. If this were their question, what they'd be doing in 2014 is explaining one effect on Germany of the event they've chosen, and here's the mark scheme. And it's only 4 marks. A simple explanation of consequence is one where students state a consequence, a very simple statement, but they can't actually back it up with anything. And a level 2 explanation is a statement backed up, a statement of effect backed up. So that's all we're looking for, and it shouldn't take them very long because time spent there is time lost later on. So 1 paragraph is enough, and the key to this is to be able to see an effect, to state effect, to have a sense of what a consequence is, and not to spend time drifting into other things that the question doesn't require. So we're going to just have a look together at an example of that, just to show you what I mean. You don't have to do anything with this, I'll take you through it, just to show you what I mean here. So the document, first of all, gives students some advice that you may wish to use with them, and then just shows candidate A is offering here a simple statement. The Dawes Plan gave loans to Germany, it helped Germany with reparations payments. And candidate B is just providing sufficient in the way of support for that to move into level 2 to make the statement stand up. And we can see some examples. Here from last summer. Now this first student, in the first paragraph, sorry I just need to move it, this first student makes a statement of effect in the first paragraph there, but then towards the end of it goes on to produce information that really the question doesn't want. Look at the end of that first paragraph. Tells us who introduced the plan, and tells us Stresemann also did many other things to help the German economy. Now that's that's not needed, is it? It's wasting exam time. And then the student goes on to offer some other effects, and again, since the question only wants one, that's wasting exam time. So it might all be good stuff, but it's wasting exam time. This answer here is targeted on effect and is long enough to do the job. One effect was that short-term loans were made from the USA banks to Germany. This helped prop up the German economy, meant that the German economy was tied to the fate of the American economy. So there's a student who really does have a sense of what consequence followed from the Dawes plan. Okay, and then we have this one. This is looking at international relations. The student is looking at the Berlin blockade. Describe one effect on the relations between the USA and the Soviet Union. Now, this is a student who knows a lot and just can't control him or herself simply to provide a statement of effect. So we have a really quite sophisticated statement of effect. We don't need to know it was considerably shorter than other Cold War disputes. We don't really want to know effects on the nations involved were huge. We want to know what the effect was. Now, we have, then the student does go on to produce an effect for us. As you can see there. But then continues well on beyond what the question needs. So, when Stalin died in 1953, his successor improved relations slightly. You can see the student has gone beyond the question. Interesting stuff, but really wasting exam time. Okay, so brief statement of effect is all they need to do, and I hope those examples will be helpful for your students there. Okay. Now if we look at our question C, this is always an analysis of causation. It's always asking why. And in the mark scheme for this we have 3 levels. Level 1 and level 2 are as you've seen them already. First of all, a very simple statement without support, then a more explained statement, so in this case a statement of causation with material in support. And then at level 3, where the student is making explicit not just here is a cause and here is some information about it, but making explicit the way in which that cause led to the stated outcome. So students will be saying this meant that, this brought about because of this. They'll be using the language of causal analysis and making their statements stand up. Our experience last summer was that many students were pretty good at analysing cause. What they were not so good at was linking them together. What they were not so good at is seeing how causes combine. And really, it is that understanding of causal combination, causal interaction, that's the key to the higher levels. Now, this is one where students are in effect given source material as stimulus. They have to comprehend it, but it gives them some pointers. Study the source and answer the question that follows. use the source and your own knowledge to explain the problems faced by the Weimar Republic. This is a 10 marker, but essentially it's asking students to do the same sort of, it's asking for the same sort of mark scheme as you've seen before. It's just that here we've got to reward the way in which they use the material that's presented to them as well. And it's important that they do use that. You can see that it would be unwise to try answering a question about the problems of the Weimar Republic without mentioning the Treaty of Versailles, opposition from left and right, and the problems of hyperinflation. So those have been offered to students. They are a help, but students must not think that they'll get more marks by ignoring what's given. They really must make use of what's in the source there as well for the highest marks. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is that the D question can have a range of targets. It can be about cause, it can be about consequence, it can be, as in the Weimar Republic, on analysis of key features, analysis of problems. So here it's important for the higher levels that students have a sense of what's this question asking me to do. If they stop at that level of description, then they're going to be saying things about the problems of the Weimar Republic, but they're unlikely to get the higher levels. Okay, so let's have a look at the mark scheme. The experience of 2011 was that some students did lose marks by not referring to the given source material. I think they genuinely did think that they'd get more marks for providing their own material, you know. They are required, there's just 3 marks for AO3 in that question. They are required to use the material in the source. It helps if they do refer directly to the source, but examiners will reward material from the source that's incorporated in the answer. But using quotation marks to show they've taken it from the source is much better. It just highlights that it's been used. Now, yes, the source will always be a written one. Alright, so let's have a look at the mark scheme then. So you're used to simple and then supported explanation of whatever, cause, consequence. But you can see within the level 2 there are marks for using the source or own knowledge, and then using the source and own knowledge. At level 3, they get into level 3 for being able to explain one factor or problem or consequence or whatever, supported by precisely selected knowledge. And again, 6 marks for using own knowledge only, another mark for using source and own knowledge, and they're not going to get into level 4 without using both. Okay, so you can see here that students get 8 marks for explaining 2 causes and 9 to 10 for showing how they combine. So the skill of linking, the skill of combining is becoming very important. We've seen it in the C question, we see it in the D question, you'll come across it again. So the ability to make links, maybe to have students in a classroom joining hands if they can make a link, holding 2 ends of a piece of string to make a link and explaining how they're linked, things that physically help them to think about linkage between causes is a good idea here. Let's have a look at paper 2. And paper 2 has a source investigation, first of all, section Now the current section B is on sources. That becomes section A of paper 2, and then a study and change. And you can see there from the assessment objectives that this is a different sort of paper from paper 1. We have 21% devoted to AO3 here, and within this paper students are going to be comprehending, interpreting and cross-referring source material, and they're going to have to evaluate historical claims as well. So they're calling on the skills of extended writing and of analysis of cause and consequence and so on that they've already demonstrated in paper 1, but they're having to demonstrate other skills as well. Alright, now the source investigation, as with the current paper, inference skills in the question A, cross-referencing skills in question B, and reaching a judgment about a view or a claim using sources and own knowledge in question C. The inference question, it will be based on a visual source, and for those of you doing the current specification, there is a change now for 2014. Students will only have to make one supported inference, but they will have to support it. So you can see it's a different technique now. If they don't support their inference, then they're stuck in level 2. So they need to go through a process of I can infer because the source shows and this suggests. So they need to go beyond what they currently have to do, which is just make an inference. They don't have to show that that inference can be made currently, but they have to do it 3 times. In the new paper, they will have to show that the source supports the making of that inference. Okay. The B question gives students 2 sources that have differences in them and asks students to cross-refer. So they need a sense of corroboration. Where are sources saying the same thing, even if in different words? So where are they corroborating points? Where are they actually challenging? Where are they contradicting? Or are they simply saying something different? Or are there differences of emphasis and so on? And students are also asked to reach judgment on the extent of difference, whether they differ substantially, marginally, whether the differences are significant or only minor. They need to be making a judgment, again for that final mark, they need to be making a judgment about the extent of difference. And students who produce a one-sided answer, and it's amazing how many of them do, if the answer is one-sided, they're going to stay in level 2. So they need to appreciate that there will always be some elements of difference as well as support. There will always be challenge or difference as well as corroboration, so that they look to produce a 2-sided answer and not just a one-sided answer. So our experience of 2011 was just this, that students do really need to look for the similarity as well as the difference. The 2014 question will push them more towards this. It will ask how far they differ, and that should help them see that they need to be thinking on the one hand, on the other hand, and then reaching a judgment about how far. But those who do only do a one-sided answer will only get 4 marks in 2014. Okay, and then the C question, evaluating a view of causation. And now students have got 4 sources in all. They're given a statement, and they have to use the sources and their own knowledge. And you can imagine that those who are unbalanced, who only use the sources or who only use their knowledge, are going to lose marks. Even those who are absolutely sure that what they bring to the paper is going to be more valued than that which they find there. As far as the mark scheme is concerned, the hierarchy that you've already become familiar with in paper 1 applies. It's just that there are obviously penalties for being unbalanced in terms of source use or lack of source use. Now, within that pack that you've just worked through, you've got the mark schemes for 2013 and 2014, and you've got exemplification of work as well. I'm not going to go through it now because it would take rather too much time, but you've got it there. Just some experience from 2011 to help us go forward into preparing for 2014. Reminding students that they must use the sources and own knowledge. And the material that you have has one example that's level 4 and another example where the student doesn't use the sources and is so an intelligent answer restricted as a result. Okay, so let's move on in our last little session to look at Paper 2, Section 2, and our study in change. For those of you familiar with the specification, the tasks here are pretty much the same, except that students will get less in the way of stimulus support. We'll come to that when we look at the C question. So let's take it in order. The first 2 questions, short answer, they're not requiring a lot in the way of expanded writing. Students only have to comprehend points from the source in the A question. They don't need to infer. They should be brief. If they do infer, they will certainly have comprehended, so they won't lose marks, but they don't need to infer. They just need to work out information. And for the B question, students are asked to identify key features of something. So what's a key feature? A key feature of anything is something, if you like, that can go under an umbrella, that can be given a heading. One key feature might have been motives or causes, or outcomes or problems, anything to which students can attach a heading and then group the material underneath. So nice exercise for this might be to give them material and ask them to find a heading for it, and then sometimes to give them a heading under which to slot material, just so that they see that this is the analysis here is a grouping exercise, isn't it? Just seeing what this information belongs to. The C question here in the study in change asks students to think about the causes of change or the nature of change. Did things improve? Did they increase? How did something change? In what ways did it change? They're all looking at the nature of change. If the question is about the process, it's looking at causes, really. What brought about a change? So it can be either. Difficult to know from 2011 whether students are much more insecure when they're dealing with change. I think they may be. Actually, they may be more confident in dealing with cause than with change, but because it was the last question in the paper and they're in a rush, that too would explain some conceptual lack of clarity, wouldn't it? If you're in a hurry, you think less clearly. But it was certainly the weakest question. That and the first one, the sequencing at the beginning, so chronology at the beginning, and dealing with change at the end, were the weakest areas in the summer here. So, what I've got for you is a document that shows all three questions. It gives mark schemes, example work, it gives planning grids, it gives advice to students. Now, I just want us in this little time that we've got to concentrate on the C question, because that's the one where they obviously do need more help.